What I've been reading. I've been reading 1984 by George Orwell, an absolute classic that I, and I'm not ashamed to admit it, had never read. And I'll do you one better. It's a book that I'm sure most folks have heard of. It's the type of book that permeated society and is just consistently relevant and referenced and within pop culture, and so much so that I knew what the book was about without knowing what the book was about. Like never looking up, what's the synopsis of this story or who the characters in it or like actual details of this specific actual story. But I knew just from it being so ubiquitous what it was about, if it makes sense. But yeah, it's one of those renowned classic books that was one that I actually did want to read. And I'm glad I finally did. It was written by George Orwell in 1949. And here is the official synopsis. It is 1984, and the world's three major powers, Oceania, Eurasia, and East Asia, are constantly at war. In Oceania, where the party is in power, the thought police unearth every act of dissent, and Big Brother is always watching. Winston Smith, a dutiful citizen of Oceania, works for the Ministry of Truth as a propaganda writer who rewrites history to suit the needs of the authoritarian government. But when Winston falls in love with fellow worker Julia, they begin to question the very system they work for, placing them in immense danger. Pursuing their forbidden love affair, Winston plans a rebellion against the party in order to regain the freedom to shape his own future. But the ever-watchful Big Brother will not tolerate opposition. And for those who speak up against the system or dare to think what the party does not want them to think, Room 101 awaits them. Now that's actually a really good synopsis, I think. Or I thought, rather. And you know what's actually really good as well that I'll link to in the episode notes? There is a video Spark Notes page that I found on YouTube, which do really good summaries and, at least for me, like help synthesize what you've read and helps highlight things that you may have missed or connections that you didn't see. And I saw the one for 1984, and I went back and looked at for like other books that I have read, and it's pretty cool. There's some nice like visual aids that makes it a fun watch, and they're not long videos. They're like 8 to 10 minutes long. And I like doing that with movies as well, like folks that do breakdowns, not necessarily like the ones that I do that are more like recaps and reviews and just like personal takeaways and things that resonated with me from movies, but folks that do actual Easter egg style breakdowns like Stuckman or like New Rock Stars. That's a dope channel for like movies and stuff too, where they'll literally watch the movie, then watch the movie frame by frame, literally frame by frame, and pick out like they have videos of 101 Easter eggs that you may have missed from the new Matrix movie. And they'll do like a half hour, 45-minute video of like breakdowns of scenes, and in the mirror of that's on the desk in the back of the room, you see a reflection that's pointing to the same sign that was hanging in the Oracle's kitchen in the first movie, and that's foreshadowing that in the next scene the Oracle is going to show up, and like sick shit like that. Like really nerdy, geeked out stuff like that, but I find it really cool. Anyway, this video Spark Notes is a pretty cool resource, and I will link to it in the episode notes and for you guys to check out. But anyway, so much like the synopsis said, this is a story written in 1949 about 1984, and 1984 being this faraway future. And it's about this totalitarian dictatorship that exists. And think about it from the mentality of George Orwell as a writer. This is the era of not too far or not too long before the era of Hitler, the era of Stalin. So he has those actual fascist totalitarian regimes as like a backdrop, which I'm sure aided his thought process in writing this story. So in this 1984 future, dystopian future, there's something called a telescreen in every single room of everywhere, in the street, in your house, in your kitchen, in your living room, in your bedroom. And it's like showing the pitfalls of like a surveillance state and, technology when it's used for nefarious purposes. And basically nobody can say shit, nobody can talk shit. There's hidden microphones all over the place, in the street, everywhere. Literally every single room of any place you ever go is either a telescreen or a hidden microphone. And so much so that if there's no telescreen visible, people are like, hey, where's the telescreen in this room? It's weird that there's no telescreen. And it's that concept of Big Brother, aka the government, is always watching. And like I mentioned before, how pervasive this story is, there's terms from it like Big Brother that we've heard in movies and songs, in politics, just people say it as like nomenclature. And Orwellian, which became a verb synonymous with like dystopian, fucked up times. Orwellian being a play on the author's name, George Orwell. The story takes place in London, where nobody has anything. Everybody has like tattered, raggedy clothes. Everybody's like on an even playing field. They work jobs that they don't like or care for. There's no freedoms. And the main character, Winston Smith, works for the Ministry of Truth, which is literally what he does all day is rewrite history. Like they're writing books in the new language of the time, which is Newspeak, where even the freedom to that language gives you to express yourself with many different words and colorful speech, even that is being controlled with the advent of Newspeak, where most words aren't allowed. And there's actually this really cool breakdown at the end of the book, the appendix of the book, that where Orwell breaks down how Newspeak works, the origins of it, how it came to be, within this like fictionalized world. But essentially, like, the words that are allowed are like the actual words and their opposites. So let's say, for example, because I don't remember any specific examples, but let's say the word hot is not allowed because it's, could be misconstrued with like sex or like arousal or something like that. They'll say you can use the word cold, and if you want to say that something is hot, you would say uncold. Or if it's very hot, double uncold. That's the way like the structure of Newspeak works. And it's pretty fucking sick, the path that he like details and takes to how big totalitarian governments, the lengths to which they will go to control their people. China. Sorry. Bless me. But he's at work. He falls for this girl that one day winds up slipping him a note, and the note says, "I love you," and he's like in shock. He's like, what the fuck? He and her wind up slowly but surely, saying like a word or two to each other in passing while they walk by each other, because there's like chivatos everywhere, and again the telescreens, and they can't be seen speaking to each other, because that's another thing. You're not allowed to like sleep with whoever you want to sleep with. Sex is just for procreation. But they find a way to be together. They devise this long winding plan to meet somewhere in the countryside where they don't think there are like any like telescreens and stuff, and they wind up having this love affair. And Winston winds up renting a like second floor bedroom from this old antiques shop that he went into just to try to find things of the past. Because again, the party, Big Brother, literally rewrites history. So things disappear that don't align with that new history. So they're like on some North Korea type shit of like telling their people, yeah, we're like the strongest superpower in the whole world. That's why everybody hates us. So whenever something like that doesn't align, everything gets burned and erased and rewritten, etc. But this guy Winston, he's like drawn to like things of the past, because he's like, this existence like doesn't sit well with him. Whenever he meets somebody that's like really old, he's like, do you ever remember when you were a kid, can you tell me of like a song that you heard, or, you know, just like tries to get information about like the actual past. But anyway, he winds up renting this like bedroom from the old man in the antique store because there's no telescreen in it. And he winds up using it as a place to meet up with Julia. And within this world, there is like rumors of like an opposition party, you know, people that are against the government. But, you know, you can't trust anybody or like research it, or, you know, so it's a predicament to try to find those like-minded folks. But him and Julia are convinced that this other guy, O'Brien, that they work with, but who's like a higher up, he's like in management, that he's part of the opposition party. And he kind of like befriends them and invites them over to his place. And he even tells them, yeah, you know, I am with this opposition party, and here, I'm going to give you a book to read, but you got to hide it. And this is the book that all of us read. And it tells you about like the real history, the real past. And, you know, it's going to be your first step in indoctrinating you and becoming part of our group, whatever, blah, blah, blah. And Winston is like over the moon happy. He's like reading the book. He's with Julia back in this apartment that he rented. And he's reading the book, and it's like feeding him all the shit that he suspected, and how Big Brother operates, and what the opposition is, etc., etc. And then after he's like finished reading the book, the thought police, as they're called, break in to the apartment, and it's revealed that the little old man from the antique store was really part of the party. And there was no telescreen in the room, but there was like an antique photo that behind it had a hidden microphone within it, so they knew what was going on the entire time. And that guy O'Brien, who was supposedly part of the opposition, he was actually with the party as well. And he got completely fucked. So Julia and Winston get taken, they get arrested, and the reference to Room 101, which again is something else that is like in the zeitgeist, and I've seen in other movies, and in The Matrix, actually, I think references Room 101. And it's like synonymous with a room where, you know, bad shit happens and like torture, etc. But long story short, they get fucking brutally tortured and electrocuted, and they put a vice kind of thing on Winston's head with rats on the other side, and threatened to let the rats go through this like flimsy little screen so they can attack and eat his eyeballs. And he's like terrified of rats as is, and he like breaks down and tells them every single thing that they want to know, and blames Julia for a lot of stuff, tells them all the shit he knows about Julia, like on some Takashi shit, just like rats on everybody and their mother. He's like a completely broken man. And O'Brien, who is part of the folks administering all the torture and stuff, get him to eventually agree and understand that if the party says that 2 + 2 = 5, then that represents the truth. The truth is whatever Big Brother and the party say the truth is. So even thinking, oh no, I know it's really 4, but I'll say it's really 5, that's not enough. Like, you have to believe and understand that whatever they want the truth to be, that is the truth. The party is the truth. And then ultimately they let them go. They wind up going back to work after these, you know, days of being tortured, and neither one is ever the same again. They're completely broken, loyal to the party, shells of themselves people. And there was one other thing that O'Brien tells Winston that resonated with me. Before Winston like completely breaks, he tells O'Brien, he was like, you did this to me, you like lured me into this, and you know, you reduced me to this lowly state. And O'Brien tells him, nah, you did this to yourself. You did it to yourself by setting yourself up against the party. And he said this dope line, which was, everything that you're experiencing now was contained within the first moment that you decided to go against the party. And I thought that was like a pretty ill and dark, albeit dark, way to think about it. And I kind of liken it to how you can never control how somebody's going to react or overreact to your actions. And even though it was like completely disproportionate, the torture that, you know, they administered on Winston versus what he actually did, which was, you know, harbor these ideas and, you know, read a book, it still definitely underscores that fact that you can't ever control how others are going to react to your actions. But anyway, folks, that's my little recap and review of George Orwell's 1984. I will link to it in the episode notes in case you guys want to check it out yourselves, as well as that video Spark Notes summary that I mentioned that I also highly recommend. 1984 by George Orwell. Check it out.